Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Yamiche Alcindor in Washington. President-elect Trump is aiming to move on quickly from his first failed cabinet pick. Just hours after Matt Gaetz withdrew his name from nomination from consideration for Attorney General, Trump tapped former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, another longtime Trump ally and loyalist, to lead the Department of Justice as Trump seeks to remake it in his own image. Bondi served as Trump's defense team during his first impeachment trial, and she has echoed Mr. Trump's false claims about fraud in the 2020 election. She also comes with considerably more relevant experience for the job than Matt Gaetz. Bondi served as Florida Attorney General for 8 years and as a prosecutor. Her selection was met with praise by RNC Chairman Michael Whatley.
We cannot go through what we have over the last 8 years with the weaponization of justice that we've seen with all of the attempts to go after Donald Trump, to go after his allies, civil court, criminal court. That needs to be shut down. It needs to be investigated, and the people who broke the laws to be able to move forward with those investigations and those cases, they need to be punished. Pam Bondi has always shown that she is tough, she is smart, she is absolutely a great pick, and she's going to be a fantastic Attorney General.
This comes as attention now turns to some of Trump's other polarizing administration picks as he rapidly fills out his cabinet. Pete Hegseth, his choice for defense secretary, is facing scrutiny over sexual assault allegations, which he denies, as well as a lack of experience for the role. Trump's choice for Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a vaccine skeptic, is also facing sexual assault allegations, which he also denies. And Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, is accused of echoing Russian propaganda, with Punchbowl News reporting some Republican senators want to see her FBI file. All of these vetting issues are playing out in the open after the picks have been named. Here's Trump ally, Senator Kevin Cramer.
If they don't want to vet more, or if they want to take a chance on these, that's up to them. Our job will be to vet. If they don't, we will. If they do, we will. Donald Trump has always liked a rather public vetting process. As you might recall, in his first term, there were times when he had cabinet secretaries on the opposite side of an issue debating it in the public sphere. I think Donald Trump processes that way, quite honestly, and that's fine if it works for him.
Meanwhile, more than 2 weeks after Mr. Trump's victory, his team still has not signed the official government agreements that allow the transition process to formally begin. That lack of agreement limits the Biden administration's ability to provide security clearances and background screenings, including to Mr. Trump's cabinet picks. Here's White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday.
The Trump-Vance transition team has not yet entered into the agreements with the White House and the General Service Administration. We certainly are stressing that the White House and the administration stand ready to provide assistance and that access to services and information certainly outlined in the GSA and the White House Memorandum of Agreement, those MOUs. So those conversations continue, and we want this to go smoothly, and that's what we're trying to get to.
And joining me now is our NBC News team covering all this news. Aaron Gilchrist has the latest on the Trump transition from West Palm Beach, Florida. Ryan Reilly is tracking the DOJ reaction to Trump's newest attorney general pick. And Ryan Nobles has the latest from Capitol Hill. So, Aaron, I want to start with you. You're there in Florida as the Trump team has quickly changed course on their AG pick. So tell us a little bit about Pam Bondi and what we know about her long relationship with Trump and sort of her views, how they align with him.
Yeah, you say quickly changed course, Yamiche. We saw this new nominee announced within 6 hours or so of the previous nominee for Attorney General deciding that he was not going to pursue the nomination process. And so Pam Bondi is someone that obviously comes with a body of experience. She was the Attorney General here in Florida from 2011 until 2019. She obviously then has that backing in terms of having prosecutorial experience, but also having experience running a part of a bureaucracy in a large state like Florida. She also is someone who has some experience with the now president-elect Donald Trump. We know that she was a member of his defense team during his first impeachment trial in the Congress. She's also someone who served on a commission that was set up during the Trump administration that dealt with the opioid crisis. And she was involved in the 2020 effort to overturn the election results on behalf of Donald Trump. And so she's somebody who is seen as a MAGA faithful, if you will, but also obviously someone who comes with a great body of experience as a prosecutor. She has indicated that in the past, she's indicated that she believed there were elements in the Department of Justice that needed some shaking up. And so it stands to reason that is something she would do. In announcing the nomination, the president-elect said Pam will refocus the DOJ to its intended purpose of fighting crime, and also praised some of the work that she did on drug trafficking as well. And so this is somebody that the Trump team believes they'll be able to get through the confirmation process, Yamiche.
And I wonder, when you think about the fact that they want to and think that they're going to be able to get this through, do they think that that is the case because Bondi has more credentials than Matt Gaetz, including the fact that, of course, she served as a state attorney general, as a prosecutor? How much is sort of her relevant experience leaning into their view of this?
Yeah, I think you make a good point there. I mean, she checks a couple of boxes. One, she is someone who has been a proponent of President Trump when he was president last time around. And since he's been running for re-election, she has spoken positively about him and the agenda that he has set, and the need for what they've termed as sort of a reform in the Department of Justice and the FBI and other entities that would fall under the purview of an attorney general. So that checks one box. The other box that's checked here, I think, is the one where she has to be confirmable. So it has to have some appeal to the senators in the United States Senate. And so you played some sound a little while ago of one senator speaking favorably about her. We heard Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, who's a member of the Judiciary Committee that would be the first to handle this nomination process. He used several adjectives like grand slam, touchdown, Olympic gold medal pick to describe Pam Bondi, all indicators that the process of confirmation for her is going to be smoother than it would have been for Matt Gaetz, who didn't get those sort of that list of superlatives when he was the nominee.
Yeah, certainly sounds like Lindsey Graham. I also want to ask you, though, about the paperwork of all of this, because as we mentioned, the White House says the transition still has not signed those memoranda of understanding agreements, and they might just sound like sort of bureaucratic things if you are outside of Washington, but really this is important for people to be able to get screenings and all the things that they need. So what's the holdup now that this has been a decisive victory on the Trump side?
You know, this was something that we started asking about back in August as the conventions were wrapping up. We asked about whether the memoranda of understanding had been signed to start the process of the transition. There are pre-election things that can happen in terms of the transition, office space and supplies, things of that nature. And we understand from the White House that to this point, at least as of late yesterday, there still had not been an agreement signed between the White House, the General Services Administration, and the Trump transition team. And you're right. Normally, you'd have those things in place that would allow for the transition team to move into Washington, to have quicker access to information and people that they would need in order to make sure that there is a smooth transition of government. And at this point, there's not been any explanation from the Trump team as to why that memorandum of understanding has yet to be signed.
Yeah, well, we'll keep looking to figure out if that paperwork gets filed. So thank you so much, Aaron, from West Palm Beach, Florida. I want to turn now to Ryan Reilly, who's here with me on set with his Eagles tie. My husband would be very happy to see that. That being said, we know that there was a sigh of release, it sounds like, from the DOJ when Matt Gaetz said, OK, I'm out of this. What's the reaction to Pam Bondi?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I had someone joke to me, well, she hasn't been accused and investigated by the FBI for having sex with a 17-year-old, so that's a plus, certainly. But, you know, this is someone who definitely has been in Donald Trump's corner. And, you know, to relate it back to Philly, right, definitely right after the 2020 election, she was downtown giving a press conference, and, you know, she was being drowned out by protesters playing Beyonce on the other side, but she was making those false claims. She made the false claim that Donald Trump won Pennsylvania. Donald Trump lost Pennsylvania in 2020. And so she wasn't on it all the way through, but that's definitely, I think, a concern. Her associations, and even as part of the January 6th investigation, she came up in relation to Cassidy Hutchinson. Yeah. So she's definitely someone who's been in Donald Trump's corner, and they expect to be a strong backer of Donald Trump. And there's concern about how close that relationship is, how far she would be willing to go, whether she's willing to push up against those post-Watergate norms that you see that divide between the White House and the Justice Department that's supposed to stop stop DOJ from being used as a political cudgel to go against, the president's political enemies.
Yeah, I also want to ask you, as you think about Pam Bondi, who maybe is less controversial than Matt Gaetz, there is, of course, also Tulsi Gabbard. Yeah. I wonder what you're hearing about that, especially from the intelligence community and all the sources that you've been talking to.
Yeah, the idea that she has propagated these Russian talking points is definitely a huge consideration. She's been very critical of the intelligence agency altogether. She had called for charges to be, dropped against Edward Snowden, which obviously the intel community was not a fan of that. So it's going to be something that's controversial. And I think, now there's indications that senators are asking more questions and want to know more information, what's in her FBI file. So this unusual process that the Trump administration has of trying to cut the FBI out of this background process altogether, I think is definitely a concern for folks, because it's like, what aren't you going to learn? What aren't you going to know? And going through that process actually does protect the White House and the president in some ways, because there's no surprises. They know sort of a decent chunk of the skeletons, at least. So there are reasons why that process is in place, and them not going through it is going to leave them vulnerable, I think, to things that they don't know.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on set, and I will ask you for the link to that site later so I can get maybe a surprise Christmas gift for my husband. We'll see.
Go Birds.
Thanks. Now, Ryan Nobles, our other Ryan, of course, you were talking to us from the halls of Congress. You said it dropped like a bomb yesterday when Gaetz withdrew. What's Pam Bondi? What are people, lawmakers? I know that most of them maybe have gone home, but I know you're talking to your sources. So what are we hearing from lawmakers about Pam Bondi?
Well, first off, I hope your husband isn't watching if we're revealing his Christmas gifts already.
He's going to be happy about that, I'm sure. That's scoring points.
Yes. But to answer your more important question about Pam Bondi, I do think that there is a degree of relief that Matt Gaetz is out of the picture. That's for absolute sure. And I do think that Pam Bondi has a much greater chance of being confirmed for a variety of reasons, many of which you've already gone over on your program, specifically the fact that she actually is a prosecuting attorney, someone that's been in a courtroom, served as the attorney general of one of the biggest states in the country. That gives her a leg up from the experience perspective that somebody like Matt Gaetz didn't have. That's not to say this is going to be complete smooth sailing. There are some question marks about Pam Bondi that I think are going to be brought up, particularly in a confirmation hearing. You could see Democrats pressing her about her role in the Stop the Steal effort and her defense of Donald Trump's claims that he won the election that he actually lost. I don't know if that loses her any votes, but keep in mind she can only lose 3 Republican votes and still win confirmation as Attorney General. So that's still an issue that she's going to have to deal with. But I don't think there's any doubt that she has a much clearer path to confirmation than Matt Gaetz ever had.
Yeah. And speaking of Matt Gaetz, there is, of course, we're now hearing from him for the first time since he withdrew his name for consideration for AG. I wonder what he's saying about his job prospects and even his future in the Trump administration and the Trump world.
Well, the first thing we have to say about Matt Gaetz is that he's completely unpredictable. You just do not know what his next move could possibly be. And the internet was running wild yesterday with the possibility that he may actually look to seat himself in the next Congress because he did win election to that seat. And even though he resigned his current seat, that next seat could possibly still be open, even though he had forecasted to the governor and relayed to the governor of Florida that he intended not to be seated. Well, Gaetz put that speculation to bed during an interview today with Charlie Kirk. Take a listen.
I was dealing with a politically motivated body. They had an axe to grind. So that was going to serve as at least enough of a basis to delay my confirmation as Attorney General. And I could have answered all those questions. I could have engaged in a months-long fact battle, but we don't have months to go through that. I'm still going to be in the fight, but it's going to be from a new perch. I do not intend to join the 119th Congress. I'm going to be fighting for President Trump. I'm going to be doing whatever he asks of me, as I always have. But I think that 8 years is probably enough time in the United States Congress.
And to that end, the governor's office, the Secretary of State's office, I should say, in Florida, mapped out the timeline for Gaetz's replacement and the special election and primary process that will have to take place in order to seat a new member of Congress. So that indicates that it won't be Matt Gaetz is sitting in that seat coming up. So what happens next with him? There's a variety of options. There's going to be an open Senate seat. Perhaps he tries to run for governor. Could he end up in a seat in the administration that is a non-Senate confirmable seat? That's also a possibility. There's also the possibility that he just tries to broaden his podcast empire, Yamiche, and just become a conservative internet commentator, which could be the most lucrative of the options he has on the table. So the one thing I know for sure is that we haven't heard the last of Matt Gaetz.
Certainly, and it would not be surprising if he became a content creator. So we'll look out for that. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.